You are listening to Fantha Tracks.
Because of the following special program, Wonder Woman and the Incredible Hulk will not be presented this evening.
It's time to get all your Star Wars news in a single file. This is Making Tracks. Here are your hosts, Mark Newbold and Mark Mulcaster.
That's not true. That's impossible.
You're listening to Making Tracks. This is episode 26, the first episode of the new decade. And joining me today, well, I'm going to throw it over to him. I'm going to let him do his own introduction because, one, I'm too lazy. Two, I will say the wrong thing. Three, it's far more entertaining for me to do this. So introduce yourself, sir. Introduce yourself.
Oh, straight into the deep end. Thanks, Mark. Okay, hi, everybody. I'm Mark Mulcaster. I am currently the Elstree base commander for the Rebel Legion, but generally, I'm just a Star Wars fan.
Star Wars fans. I'm glad you're on the right podcast because there's a show called Making Treks, and I don't think that would be the show for you.
Yeah, I've not seen Picard yet, so.
Oh, it's very good. Here we go. I'm starting off on Star Trek already. I've ruined
Tangent.
it all. I've ruined it all. Well, we've got loads to talk about. We've got the Rise of Skywalker to talk about. We've got some content from the blue carpet as well. I keep having to remember that it's the blue carpet, not the red carpet.
Yeah, the blue carpet.
Blue carpet. And oh, by the way, thank you very much for sending me my little cutting of blue carpet. I'm very happy.
You're welcome.
We could also talk about Colin Trevorrow's episode 9 script for Duel of the Fates. What a great title that would have been. We also catch up with Matt Fox from May the Toys Be With Us, and we'll also talk about some of the stuff that's coming. So we're not going to prevaricate, because I'm very good at that. Mark, episode 9, Rise of Skywalker, final chapter of the Skywalker saga. Gut feeling, what were your first initial thoughts when you sat down and read it?
Wow. It just didn't let up, really, did it? It was just straight out of the gate. It was just fast and furious. And, I mean, let's be fair. Okay, cards on the table. I have seen this film 14 times. But at the same time, this isn't the perfect film. And it's probably not maybe for some, the most perfect of Star Wars endings. But I just thought it was a good film. It was fun. I thought the characters and their kind of like relationships and how they kind of gelled together just worked really well. So I just thought it was great. How did you think it went?
Very much the same. I mean, the first time I saw it, it was at the premiere. I remember waving to you across the way, and obviously soaked because it was chucking it down with rain.
It was chucking it down, yeah. And there was some wet costumers out that day, yeah.
Very wet, very, very wet. I mean, it's tricky in the sense that you're knowing that it's the last ever Skywalker Saga episode. It's not only a sequel to The Last Jedi and the Force Awakens, but a sequel to all of the films that have preceded it. So it had a really tricky job to do. I mean, the first time I saw it, I loved it the first time I saw it, and I've seen it 5 times at the cinema, so I'm way behind you 5 times. But I saw it the 5th time last week and enjoyed it every bit as much as the first time, which is, I think, that's a big tick in the box because, you know, there's certain Star Wars films that you see that you love the first time and then it's diminishing returns in the sense of watching them again and again. It doesn't quite grab you. Other films like Empire, I loved it from the start and I love it now. You know, Phantom Menace, hated it the first time I saw it.
Really?
Absolutely adore it now. Yeah, you got these different relationships. I loved it exactly for the same reason as you. It was like foot to the floor, pacey and fast, didn't let up, didn't stop. You know, but you kind of got time to step into everybody's story enough to know where they were and what they wanted to do and what they needed to do. The Emperor's being his old usual sneaky, snidey self. I loved it. I really did.
Yeah, no, I think, to be honest, I think there's no way that everybody's expectations or needs were going to be kind of met. I think with this, just because it's really difficult to tie together all 3 of the trilogies because they are kind of they're similar, but they're also different. And I think, you know, possibly if there was a through line really kind of thought out from the beginning, things may have been a little bit different with maybe the middle chapter. It's interesting. I mean, I don't necessarily get into the discourse of like these films, and discourse seems to be like a word thrown around quite a lot. We've discussed in Rise of Skywalker, but I personally didn't really feel like there was too many kind of like, you know, middle fingers up to The Last Jedi as such. I mean, and that's the thing. I really liked The Last Jedi, partly because I think, you know, I work in film and TV, and I have quite a critical kind of like approach to films just from the job, basically. And I think that's, that's why the critics didn't like it, was because Last Jedi was so kind of subversive and different. And then obviously we've come back to a classic Star Wars feel and kind of themes and stuff. But then it's like, you don't want to please the critics. You want to just make sure that you kind of, the fans and the repeat viewings are there, and that actually at the end of the day, I think you need to leave that film with a good feeling. Yeah. So,
well, there's a question for you. You've just used the phrase fan service. What do you think to that? Do you think it's a bad thing to give fan service, because ultimately they're making the films for the fans? I know that we're the 2% of nutty fans who do podcasts on a Sunday morning like we do, sort of thing, or go trooping, or whatever, we might travel across the world for celebration. But the other 98% of general regular cinema goers need to be confident they're going to get an exciting, action-packed, Star Wars film, a roller coaster. They kind of know the main things to expect. But by the same token, fan service, if you're not servicing your fans, who the hell are you making these films for?
Well, that is it, because at the end of the day, the goodwill and the word of mouth comes from the fans. If your fan base isn't happy, we'll look at kind of what happened with The Last Jedi.
I thought you were going to say cats then, sorry.
Well, yeah, luckily I haven't had time to see that. So, or maybe unluckily, I suppose it depends on your point of view. But I think at the end of the day, you have to please the fans, and you have to give them certain bits of kind of like connective tissue, of the little nods here and there, whatever they are. I think obviously in a film like Star Wars, which has been in the public zeitgeist for over 40 years now, some of those fan service moments need to be big enough that the general audience will get. For instance, it was a little bit cringy, but to my opinion anyway, but Chewie getting the medal was kind of that one moment that I think lots of people who weren't necessarily a big Star Wars fan who knows all the ins and outs would probably kind of go, oh, that's quite a nice touch. I mean, obviously, with more viewing, you see that Leia's holding the medal when she's trying to connect to Ben.
Yeah.
But at the same time, stuff like that is good. And, the irony is, you look at The Force Awakens, where Finn's on the Falcon trying to kind of get some also medical supplies to help Chewie. He pulls out the Jedi training remote. And that was one of those moments which was so blatantly a fan service kind of moment.
True.
At that point. But then you see Rise of Skywalker and you see this probe bobbing around and Rey's training with it.
Yeah.
No one's ever questioned that. No one's ever said, oh, that's a fan service moment, because it's not. That's just like part of the mechanics and part of the minutiae of Star Wars now. So it's a difficult thing, and I think a bit like porn, you kind of know it when you see it, but then I think sometimes a bit like porn, it's not a bad thing to have it.
I love this angle. I've got to say, I love that. That's the best analogy you're ever going to come. You peaked early, mate. Talking of that. No,
moving on.
I totally agree. That's a good analogy. I totally agree in the sense that there's certain things that come out that there we go. Certain things that were shown that you go, well, yeah, that feels organic and real in the moment. The training remote is the perfect example. And like you say, other moments that may feel a little bit forced. I mean, I will go into the weeds a little bit in a moment, but I think Rey's ending, obviously choosing the name Skywalker, being on Tatooine, to me, filmically, that felt like, well, we're wrapping up 9 films. Even though Episode 4 was made first, it's not the first film, but then Phantom Menace is on Tatooine, so there's a connective link there. End of Revenge of the Sith, at the homestead with the twin sons. So that felt very much as a visually wrapping a bow on it,
Yeah.
And taking the name as well, to me, made all the sense in the world. I don't know what you think.
I think so. I mean, I think it kind of also slightly depends upon what Rey does with that name.
Yeah.
For instance, now obviously we know from obviously some of the expanded universe stuff like Rise of Resistance, the First Order's controlling kind of the hollow comms and stuff, so that the messages aren't getting out.
Yeah.
So if this is kind of a way to undo some of that, and again for there to be this beacon of hope, I mean, it kind of depends on where Rey goes from there, really.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'd love to see what happens once she gets back on the Falcon. What's her next step? Does she go and she's starts looking for other Jedi or other Force sensitives, or does she just kind of like, I guess, just let it happen organically? It would be interesting to see kind of what happens after this. Whether or not we get anything, who knows?
That's a good point. And you said something earlier about how you don't think Rise of Skywalker gives the middle finger to Last Jedi. I don't either. I mean, the obviously the scene on Exegol where Rey is doing the ceremony with the Emperor when she's supposed to dispatch him so his spirit can take her and all that sort of stuff, giving the saber to Kylo, that completely came from Last Jedi. The only moment I thought was a little, and I don't think it was a middle finger, I just think it was cheeky, was when she was going to throw the lightsaber into the wreckage of the TIE fighter on Acto, and Luke catches it and basically said that's no way to treat a lightsaber.
Yeah,
which I thought was kind of cute.
Yeah, I think so. And I think just that one line, I mean, I think him catching the saber is kind of like, I think that just goes to show actually how strong Luke is, because obviously we saw a little bit of kind of like physical world interaction with Yoda in Last Jedi, but for somebody to actually physically catch a saber and then present it back to somebody, that takes it almost to another level. But
visually as well, actually, when you see the shot, it's Luke's hand holding a lightsaber, which to me just screamed Empire.
Yeah, totally.
You know, so there's loads of little connective links like that.
I think so, and I think people get too hung up with Last Jedi with just the way he throws it over his shoulder. Now, obviously, like a lot of people before Rise of Skywalker, I sat and I rewatched all the films, and I think so I went to the press screening, so the day before the premiere, and so that morning I had a day off work. I watched Last Jedi again, and I probably hadn't seen it for about 6 or 7 months. And having just watched Force Awakens the night before, I really loved how it just ran straight into the like Last Jedi. I thought that was quite cool. But for probably the first time, I actually properly laughed when Luke just threw that saber over his shoulder, because it was, which is just bizarre. I mean, I was quite surprised that I did that, because I knew it was coming. I knew to expect it. Yeah. Even through Last Jedi, there is a character arc with Luke Skywalker that ends with his chat, his pep talk with Rey in the Rise of Skywalker, which I think was quite a nice way to do it. I mean, there's only so much you could do with Force Ghosts, really. I was kind of actually expecting him to do what was mentioned in the Trevorrow script, which was to actually possibly be kind of haunting Kylo a little bit and, you know, maybe going between the two. That's kind of where I thought this was probably going to go. But to actually have him just on Acto, and even seeing Rey almost fall down the same kind of path that he was, making those same mistakes, I thought that was really good, and a really interesting choice to kind of homogenise that trilogy.
It's an interesting comparison as well that you think because I think as much as being a sequel to Last Jedi, it very much feels like a sequel to Force Awakens, but more than anything, it feels like a sequel to Return of the Jedi to me. And just comparing Obi-Wan on Dagobah speaking to Luke and then appearing on Endor at the end, Luke on Acto talking to Rey and then appearing on Tatooine at the end, with Leia, obviously, as we saw Anakin and Yoda at the end of Jedi. There's just all these nice thematic comparisons and link-ups between, you know, so I don't think the circle theory thing fits quite as much with the sequel trilogy as it did with the prequels and the original. No. But there are definitely elements of it in there.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think if we were to get literally to the end of this sequel trilogy and for us to not have been on Tatooine at all, I think there'll be more complaints. I mean, I thought the way it was done and linking up kind of like that with Jakku and how Rey gets down with the sandbank, I thought that was a really nice touch. And that's obviously, you know, that's a beautiful character moment. I mean, in honesty, when I first saw that scene, that completely slayed me. I was a complete puddle by that point. I was a puddle for most of that film, but that I was just, as soon as they went over and you saw the Falcon fly over the Jared's handcrawler and it tilt down, I was like, I know exactly where I am, and this is not going to be kind of like nice for my girlfriend next to me who was having to carry the tissues and stuff. But yeah, it was quite nice. Having watched Last Jedi and then Rise of Skywalker so quickly, there was something slightly more poignant about the twin sons in The Last Jedi, and how Luke kind of like sees them at the end, to how they were kind of done in The Rise of Skywalker. But it was more of a, let's put a button on this, you know. And also there's that kind of visual kind of like gag between like BB-8 and the twin sons kind of looking slightly similar, which is, you know, whether that's a happy accident or not, it did look quite cool.
I did spot that. So whilst we're on the subject of Rise of Skywalker, let's quickly step back a month. Let's go back to December, back to the blue carpet. You were on one side waving at me. I was on the other side waving at you. It was chucking it down with rain, and we were fortunate enough to be in the press pit, so we got the chance to talk to a whole great bunch of people. You're going to hear us talk to Domhnall Gleeson, Joonas Suotamo, Terrio, Callum Greene, Warwick Davis, Hassan and Shirley Henderson.
You must have been like a kinder candy store in this film. Have you enjoyed it as much as you thought you would enjoy it?
I loved every second of it. The people who do it really care about it. They make it with great care, great diligence, and great love. And so that's been a privilege. Yeah.
What's your biggest takeaway been from all of this, the whole experience?
I don't know yet. I haven't seen it yet. I'm waiting to see it for it to feel over. So I've got a feeling I'll feel slightly differently in a couple hours' time. Thank you very much.
Hello, how you doing?
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, how's it going?
How you going, man? Yeah, good.
Good to see you. It's been a while since we spoke, I think, when we did the Insider interview. A lot's changed. Peter's not around anymore. You're now a dad. Life has moved on. So from when you started in Force Awakens to where you are now, how different is life in general?
Well, life, it's changed. It's changed. I'm now more, active in traveling the world and seeing, and I'm also more. I know what it means to be a part of Star Wars now. When Force Awakens I didn't know the reach of the fandom and how everywhere they are, and that's been wonderful, great, wonderfully great to experience, because the fans they don't desert you. They're so strong, and that's what I love about Star Wars.
And if you could go back those 5 years, and tell yourself something you now know that you wish you'd known then, what would it be?
It will be okay.
And this film in particular, you're on a great run. Solo was amazing. Please make Solo too. What about this one? How happy are you with this final Skywalker Saga film?
I could not be more happier. It's one emotional journey that I wish people will see. And tell me all about it, because it's I can't wait to discuss it with people.
We can't wait either. Thanks, Joonas.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Hey guys.
Hi, Chris.
Hey.
Kids playing with Star Wars toys in the playground have an amazing story in their head. Anybody who's rolled a D6 has an amazing story in his head, but you had the responsibility of bringing this home as co-writer. So in terms of responsibility for wanting to nail it, because clearly you've been a fan for a long time as well, how did that sit on your shoulders?
Well, it's sort of an uneasy negotiation between wanting to pay respect to the past and also look to the future. I mean, we really did want to think about this as the season finale of a series that is a beloved thing that has been going on for a long time, and so we wanted you to have the sense of previous seasons, the previous characters, but also to have a sense of something new. But it was tough. Every day going to work was joyous because your job is making Star Wars. How could that not be joyous? And we never forgot that. But we had our rough days and our wrestling matches and our arguments for sure.
When you're rolling the story around, because it's a big nut to crack, you must have had 1,000 options and 1,000 different ways of. How did you whittle it down to come to the conclusion that you did?
Well, we just came back down to the feeling, and we thought, Star Wars it's a big galaxy, and there are a lot of bells and whistles, but what it comes down to is a family saga, and the love of a father for his son, and the love of friends for each other. And so whenever we were sort of at sea and thought that, we could go in a million different directions, we tried to pull it back down to the character stories and to the human feelings, or the non-human feelings, because so many of the characters are not human, but yeah, just down to the basic feelings.
And you've brought the Skywalker Saga home. If the opportunity ever came along to do more, you'd clearly be happy to do it, I assume?
Well, how could... I don't think it's in my future necessarily, because I know they're going in all kinds of new directions, but of course, who wouldn't want to live in Star Wars for a longer... Yeah.
Brilliant. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Welcome. It's a tremendous responsibility being involved in a film of this magnitude anyway, but this film in particular carries an extra weight. Is that a burden when you go into a film like this, or do you just have to free yourself up and go for it?
I think you have to free yourself up and go for it. I mean, I think that the writing was done in an effort to honor that, and there was an awareness of that. It's, the elephant in the room. But then you have to just roll up your shirt sleeves and get to it, and Chris Terrio and J.J. really embraced that, went for it. But they're fans themselves, so it was never too far from their imaginations. And I think that when they started giggling and laughing about what they had gotten, you knew it was right. So there's the beauty of them not just executing it from a craft point of view, but also from being fans. And I think that sings, and I think that comes across in the movie. And so it was, we had pleasure in executing those ideas and working up concept designs based on that and casting based on that. So by the time we got ready to shoot it, we were into it and rolling, and then you're just working. It's hard enough without worrying.
Yeah.
I think this week J.J. has been extremely nervous and worrying, but I think he's done an amazing job. We're so proud of what we've made, and hopefully people will feel the same once they've seen it.
And also, it's the end of the Skywalker saga, 9 films, 42 years, but for little kids, this might be their first Star Wars film.
Exactly.
So what is there about this film that, whilst it's an ending of sorts, will bring in new fans?
Well, I think it does stand on its own in a very weird way in terms of what you need to know. Obviously, there are many beats and special guest appearances and little nuggets for people that, are very special if you know. But I don't think you have to know. And I think I would say it mirrors the charm of New Hope in terms of just a universal, worldwide, timeless sense of camaraderie, friendship, doing the right thing, sticking by your friends when you get into a tough spot. And I can't think of a better message right now in today's political climate than that. And I'm very proud to be that is front and center in the movie we've created.
Fantastic. Thanks for your time. All the best.
How wet we are now.
You're not wet, are you, by any chance? You've been in all 3 trilogies now. You've said goodbye to Star Wars 3 separate times. How does that feel?
Yeah, Return of the Jedi, my first Star Wars movie, we felt like that was it then. And then, of course, the prequels came along, and now we've had these newer movies as well. And, it's more poignant tonight, though, I think, because it's obviously the conclusion of these 9 films. We won't be making any more Skywalker Saga films. And also, it's the conclusion of that story as well, which is quite emotional, I think.
We spoke in The Insider over the summer. Now you've got more stories to tell. Are there any stories that will sit in your sort of top 5 classic Star Wars moments from Rise of Skywalker?
I mean, there's loads of memories, and I've got to dig deep to find them again. I mean, there was so much going on that film for me, and it's really always about the people. It's about the cast and the crew that you work with, and those people being, obviously rich and steeped in Star Wars history themselves. Some of those people I worked with when I was 11, and here I am working with them all once again. So yeah, it's for me, it's always about the people.
It's always good to see you. Cheers. Hassan, welcome.
Thank you.
How have you been enjoying the premiere so far?
It's my first ever premiere, so it's really cool. Yeah.
And being in the film, obviously, it's an incredible experience, but how was it? How did it feel being out there?
Like you said, it's a massive movie, so it's a bit of pressure when you play the little guy, but Lee helps you and everything, so it's really cool of him. And at the same time, it's really it's a really big role. You feel a bit of pressure, but everybody helps you, so you get through it. It's really cool.
And what's your big takeaway from being involved in this film?
Meeting loads of nice, lovely people, to be honest, and obviously work with them every day, and then getting the role obviously as well. So being able to do R2-D2 and playing such a big part in the movie.
Absolutely, he's a legend of a character. What's next for you?
I don't know. We'll see what happens.
Brilliant. All the best. Thank you very much. Tell us what you can about your role in this.
I play Babu Frick. He's a droid smith. And beyond that, I don't know very much more than what... I did the bits that I did, which I'm not allowed to tell you until you see it.
Have you seen your action figure yet?
I haven't seen anything yet. I've not seen anything.
So
I've not seen the film, I've not seen it. Oh, I
You've not seen the film
yet
either?
No. I have, it's great. I didn't know there was an action figure. So.
Oh, yeah. A 6-inch figure of 3PO comes with the Babu Frick small figure.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Thank you.
We also step inside the cinema itself, where Kathleen Kennedy and J.J. Abrams introduce the film.
Tonight you're all very, very lucky that you are some of the first in the world to be seeing this film. It's my absolute pleasure. Please give a massive London welcome, first of all, the wonderful producer and president of Lucasfilm, the extraordinary Kathleen Kennedy. The team from Sweden, Chris Terrio. Producer Michelle Rejwan. Executive producer Callum Greene. And producer, writer, director J.J. Abrams.
Could not be happier to be back in London. This is where essentially it all started. I also am incredibly excited because I realized as we were walking in here, even we haven't seen the movie in IMAX. So you guys are absolutely the first audience to get this sneak peek in such a fabulous way. But England, the UK has been incredibly special to Star Wars for a long, long time. And I just want to thank, on behalf of all of us, everybody who's in this room, and I know there's a lot of people that are on our crew that worked on this film, gave a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. In addition to ILM, which is based here, we now have such an amazing group of artists, visual effects artists that are working with us, so I want to do a shout out to them. I also want to thank the Walt Disney Company, Bob Iger, Alan Horn, Alan Bergman. Bob and Alan are both here tonight. And I especially want to thank the people next to me, Chris Terrio, our screenwriter, Michelle Rejwan, who was an incredible partner in producing this film, and executive producer Callum Greene. And of course, our illustrious director, J.J. Abrams. We started this trilogy with J.J. and we're completing really what is a 42-year storytelling experience, and I think you're in for a real treat when you see what he has accomplished. So I'll let him introduce more. Oh my God.
Thank you.
Sorry.
I brought my own. First of all, I'd like you all to refer to me as illustrious. Because I think that's how we'll get along. I cannot thank you enough. Thank you, Kathy, for hiring me, and also for that lovely introduction and everything else you've done along the way. Chris Terrio, a mind like yours I've never met. You're just the greatest person to be in the trenches with. And Michelle Rejwan, who every day asks the question, is that good enough, really? And sometimes we say, yeah. No, we didn't say yeah. Well, what do you mean? And we had a conversation. Let's show it, shall we? No, I'm kidding. I have no footage of that conversation. Callum Greene, an amazing executive producer. This is a hand warmer. Someone gave me a hand warmer because it was cold outside. It is crazy cold outside. The thing I want to say is being back in London is a very bittersweet thing because it's the greatest city, and we had such an amazing time shooting here and are so grateful to everyone who worked on the movie, and many of you are here. And at the end, if you happen to stay for the credits, there are thousands of names you will see, and many of those people are here and just did the most extraordinary job, and we could not be more grateful to all of you. The bitter part is the saying goodbye. This is the end of the road. This is the last time we'll do this. And so I've loved these people, the people on screen, everyone behind the scenes. I cannot say enough about what an education it was, how humbling it was to see the brilliance, as Kathy said, the craftspersonship, but also just the spirit with which everyone worked on this movie. So thank you for all you've done, London, Pinewood, the crew, and most importantly, we hope you enjoy tonight. We're thankful to all of you for being here, so thanks so much. Cheers. Oh yeah. Let's meet some people who we filmed. Ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. Once upon a time. Ladies and gentlemen, let's bring out some of the cast. Mr. Anthony Daniels. Mr. Ian McDermott. Mr. Billy D. Williams. Mr. Joonas Suotamo. Mr. Domhnall Gleeson. Mr. Richard E. Grunt. Ms. Tyler E. Tran. Ms. Naomi Aki. Ms. Carrie Russell. Mr. Oscar Isaac. Mr. John Boyega. And the illustrious is Daisy Ridley.
Ladies and gentlemen, I
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.
And now, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, please sit back and enjoy Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker.
I'm Anthony Daniels, and you are listening to Fantha Tracks. Well done.
So, we've just been talking about Rise of Skywalker, and we've discussed quite a few elements of it. And one thing that you said that makes me think is that how could we go through a whole Star Wars trilogy without at some point going to Tatooine? And there is, conspicuous by its absence, one very key location, I think, that never got a look in the sequel trilogy, and that's Coruscant. But that being said, Colin Trevorrow's Episode 9 script, Duel of the Fates, has come out, and it felt very heavily focused on Coruscant. We've all had a little read through it, some more deeply than others, but we've certainly seen the gorgeous artwork that's accompanying it. What are your initial thoughts on that version of what Episode 9 might have been?
I mean, I don't know if it's the concept art informing me, but it feels really dark. There's a lot of, especially with concept art, a lot of use of like shadow contrasts there. Yeah, there's some parts I quite liked. Other parts I was just like, but it's difficult because it's kind of like it's a draft, and everything can sound like amazing or really ropey on paper, but actually it's how that translates to the screen. How do those kind of beats and stuff kind of get translated? And let's be honest, in this day and age with the kind of studio system, how much of this original script and outline would actually make it to the final screenplay anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, we're hearing obviously conversations about, the extended J.J. cut, as it were, quote unquote, and all that kind of stuff, and how much tinkering Disney did with it. You kind of go, well, just because this is how it is. I mean, it'd be interesting now to see the original outline of Rise of Skywalker as J.J. and Chris Terrio kind of wrote it, and kind of compare the two. I mean, I was wondering about Coruscant because it is conspicuous, and I guess they kind of did that, I think, maybe originally in Force Awakens, just to kind of, because Coruscant was such a heavy part of the prequel trilogy.
Yeah.
You step away from that because we are in a different part of the galaxy, so to speak. But
yeah.
I think the one thing that actually, let's be fair to J.J. and let's compare it to Return of Jedi as it is now, I think the celebration scenes at the end of Return of Jedi are completely 10 times more stronger than the ones from The Rise of Skywalker, personally.
Yeah.
I think it's partly because of the locations. I mean, they showed Bespin and Cloud City, I guess, partly because of a Lando connection.
Yeah.
But then two planets that really don't have a massive human population, Jakku and Endor. They were nice choices, but I kind of felt from a story perspective, it would have been so much more exciting to see some other planets somewhere.
I agree, and you make a good point in that I've often wondered, and I don't think it's ever been overtly stated, but you look at Force Awakens and you look at Jakku and you think that could easily be Tatooine. You look at Hosnian Prime, you think that could easily be Coruscant, and it just feels like at some juncture they decided to veer left and change it to other, change the names, move the locations, and just shift it up a bit because they didn't just want to repeat what had gone before. And of course, in the galaxy, there's going to be dozens of planets like Hoth and dozens of planets like Endor or Tatooine or whatever, So the geography of it, the geology or whatever is there's going to be loads of planets out there like that. But yeah, you make a good point that the celebration scenes at the end, you see the Star Destroyer go down past Bespin. I don't know. I don't quite know. That's one thing that's kind of evaded me. It did feel a little bit like the droid control ship in Phantom Menace, where the one ship goes down and then all the battle droids go down, all the ships stop working. And it did feel a bit like that, which seems like a kind of a fatal flaw. But then that's very much a part of Star Wars, lighting the fuse inside the Death Star in Rogue One sort of concept, isn't it?
The spark that lights the fuse that lights the blah blah blah. That, But what was interesting is that Star Destroyer over at Endor is totally cut in half by somebody doing a hold-out manoeuvre.
I've got to say, I loved that line. That whole line, it's a 1 in a million shot. So when you see some of this concept art from Duel of Fates, it looks dark, force, lightsaber guillotines, and, the AT-STs all facing off on Coruscant. It's like a people's uprising, and all that stuff. And it throws me back to if what the rumours are to be believed, that Rogue One was going to be Star Wars Saving Private Ryan, and then Gareth delivers Saving Private Ryan, and Disney go, oh, this is too dark.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It kind of feels like Trevorrow's script has gone down. Yeah, it's properly gone Revenge of the Sith dark. And whereas George had the final say on Sith, okay, let's make it a PG-13, what the hell? You know, Disney have looked at that and gone, that is too dark. You know, Hook's committing Harry Carey at the end sort of thing. And all that, you know. It's quite heavy.
I think also, I think you take that. I mean, that could have been a really poignant moment for somebody like Hux. If Hux wasn't Hux, in respect of like how he's really been, like how he was portrayed and how he was kind of like played off against Kylo in The Last Jedi. It's something that you could see General Pryde doing, bearing in mind of like how long he's been kind of like supporting and working for the Empire. But yeah, I think for Hux, J.J. was probably put into a corner a little bit by how he was handled by Rian Johnson in The Last Jedi.
Yeah.
Guillotines and stuff like that. Again, that's something that was kind of in The Last Jedi. Executioner Troopers had those kind of guillotine type things.
Yeah.
It's nice. I mean, there's that beautiful picture of like a old Leia bending down either to give something or receive something from BB-8 in a New Hope-esque kind of silhouette kind of style, which is just lovely. I mean, I see some of this stuff as almost being a little bit like just trying to get the tone. For instance, like Rey wearing the Luke Jedi.
The Luke Jedi outfit, which I thought looked really cool, actually. That was pretty cool.
But obviously, I think if we saw that, a bit like when we first saw Lando, the concept art for Lando for Rise of Skywalker, when exactly the same thing as he wore in Solo. You'd be like, that's a bit on the nose.
True.
And bearing in mind, I think also, you know, the connotations of what that costume was actually meant to mean for Luke in Return of the Jedi about him possibly being on the dark side, if that makes sense. I think that's probably just a kind of like an artistic kind of like, just to get the sense of the tone of it. I love the picture of Luke kind of holding what looks like for the blade of Kylo's saber. That one is pretty cool. And obviously...
And R2 having the dome shot with 3PO leaning over him.
I mean, that would be beautiful.
Yeah.
I think, again...
It throws you back to A New Hope as well, because obviously he got his dome smashed in A New Hope in the trench run, didn't he?
Well, that I was going to say, you know, for the same thing, but the way 3PO there is kind of cradling him, it kind of feels slightly more final. I know Trevorrow has kind of come out and said that actually it's not, he would have been fine, but at least the way those figures are posed in that image are very kind of like, this is the end.
Hello, I'm Ahmed Best, and you're listening to Fantha Tracks.
So we're going to step away from this conversation for a little bit. We're going to step all the way across to Carl Bayliss, our roving reporter, who sat down with Matt Fox from May the Toys Be With Us, talked a little bit about Star Wars, unbelievably. Here's what Carl and Matt had to say.
I used to have one of them.
Yeah.
And it's always sort of said with this mixture of regret and longing. I used to have one of them. You know, it got sold somewhere back down the line. But, you know, I hopefully I'm sort of, you know, carrying the torch for those people that want a chance to revisit their childhood and see these lovely old toys again, see the beautiful artworks in terms of the movie posters. And, you know, in a way, I really love the hobby. I genuinely love the hobby. And I wouldn't do it if I didn't. And I hope that I am growing the hobby in some way as well, that some people may come along to this and perhaps they've still got some toys up in their loft and they encouraged to go and get them out, or they want to start a collection themselves. You know, I think it's a really nice, healthy thing to be involved in.
Yeah, and as you touched on as well, you know, it isn't just although it's called May the Toys Be With You. There was a really big focus on the cinema posters, and in Worcester as well. You'd even managed to incorporate the front signage from the Odeon cinema.
That's right. I did manage to get some Odeon letters from the Odeon in New York, and that they're actually from the era. They changed them to blue sometime in the 90s, and they don't look half as cool. But my memory of Odeon as a kid is the red lettering.
Yeah,
and I managed to find these letters that had come down off the York Cinema. So I have them, and they tour around with the collection. But in Worcester, it was even more ideal because Worcester Museum themselves hold well over 1 million objects down in the basement. They sort of took me on a little tour and showed me all of these things they have down there that aren't on display generally.
Yeah.
But they had the original Odeon letters from the Odeon in Worcester.
Yeah, which is,
and they're gorgeous big things, lovely letters.
And it's pretty much opposite the museum as well, the Odeon Cinema.
It's fantastic that it survived, because many of them haven't, and we've gone from having around 7,500 cinemas in the UK at the peak, to a fewer than 1,000 cinemas today, and the lovely old Art Deco High Street cinema that we still had in the 70s and 80s when Star Wars did its original run have mostly vanished, sadly. But I've still got a lot of sort of passion and nostalgia for cinema, and in fact during the 90s I worked as a cinema manager for a while as well, as part of my interest in the whole sort of cinema experience.
Cool. So that brings us sort of right up to date almost. So what's next for for you and the exhibition?
I'm still adding bits and bobs to my collection. I am a hopeless collector. I don't think I'm ever really gonna stop. But you pick all the low hanging fruit first, and then the things you're kind of left with are the far more esoteric and rare and unusual items. So there's still things that I'd love to have. I know Dave Tree, actually, one of your collaborators. He's got a sort of BBFC film certificate for the original Star Wars film, sort of saying, certificate you, which I did try and sort of twist his arm to see if he might sell that to me in the past, but I think that's what he's holding on to. So it's the things, there are bits and bobs like that I'd love to get. Recently, I did purchase a Empire Strikes Back Gone with the Wind UK quad poster, and this is sort of the fantastic image that was originally done by Roger Castell, with the sort of swooning Lear and Han romantically in there, and it's one of the most beautiful of the Star Wars posters. I've had a sort of a slightly trimmed down version for a long time, because it's a super rare poster, and quite a few of the ones that are out there were trimmed to fit the London Underground. They had a slightly different size picture frame down there. So it's just a little bit below the normal sort of 30 by 40 size of a standard cinema poster. But I managed to find a full-size one, which is something I've been hunting for 7 years. So I've got that. So that'll be a new addition at the next exhibition. I've also managed to find some fantastic Palatoy pre-production materials, and some schematics for the Darth Vader TIE Fighter are now included. And I've got also a Kenner tooling manual from that shows again some of the engineering process that went into the actual production of the toys. So that's a sort of I don't want to say it's an area of collecting that I'm moving into, because prototypes are a pretty hard area of collecting to move into, because 99.9% of all the stuff is over in the States, and you need very deep pockets to sort of collect that stuff.
It's them over the Atlantic, yes.
Exactly, absolutely. But the next show that May the Toys Be With You will be on show is at the Time and Tide Museum. If I can do a little plug, Time and Tide Museum, which is in Great Yarmouth, a lovely seaside town, and it's opening there on the 28th of March, and it's going to be there for about 6 months. So do if you're in Great Yarmouth on that side of the east side of the country, then do please pop in and see some great Star Wars goodness there.
Hi, this is Dave Chapman, and you're listening to Fantha Tracks.
I went on holiday in Great Yarmouth many years ago, on a boating holiday in the Norfolk Broads, but it's a lovely part of the world, and definitely if you're in that area either on holiday or if you live anywhere that's commutable to there, I would thoroughly recommend going to see the exhibition, because it is an absolute treasure trove of toys, memorabilia. Let's say I think I ended up going back 4 times to the Worcester exhibition with sort of various groups of friends, and every time you just picked up something different, particularly taken with the prototype toys. there was a sand trooper, which Marsha Parkins, Tops artist, who was sort of there for the opening day of Worcester. She's a big sand trooper fan. So
yes.
She's really taken with the sort of the original Stormtrooper, Sand Trooper figure that obviously never made it to production. And we had a Fantha Tracks day out as well, so the banter was obviously very, very much in vogue that day. But,
yes. Yeah, they're fun. That was sort of a range of custom-made figures that were mimicking Kenner's final toy line. If Kenner's toy line had continued, then we would have had a Bantha. We'd have had a TIE bomber. We'd have had the Tarkin figure, the Gargan figure, potentially a Slave Leia even, and the tandem X-wing, which is a really cool thing. And you know, it's great that some of these things seem to have come back round. The tandem X-wing would have been modelled in black, and then we had Poe Dameron's black TIE fighter in The Force Awakens. So I love the way, and we've seen it in The Mandalorian as well, that they've been sort of looking back at the toy line, and they've been thinking some of these things, and that they've been coming back into actually on the screen.
The troop carrier.
Yeah, that was great, wasn't it? Seeing that turn up,
and the of course the ice cream maker.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
turns out it's a safe. Who knew? We thought the guy just liked ice cream.
Yes.
There you go. He was actually taking all his valuables with him. So.
The Mandalorian was, as a cinema guy, The Mandalorian was one that I was worried about, because I've always seen Star Wars as a big screen. You know, it's a movie experience, and I collect cinema memorabilia, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to see sort of Star Wars shrunk down to the small screen, to shrunk down in scale and ambition and budget. So I was a bit concerned about the whole Mandalorian thing in the run up to it. And I guess sort of a few minutes into the first episode, we had that sort of blue merman character right at the start. I thought, he's a bit of a sort of a TV type alien. You know, he looks like he might belong to Star Trek Voyager or Babylon 5. And but I shouldn't have worried, because you know it picked up through that first episode, and into the second and third episodes. You know, those first 3 episodes together actually could you know be sort of, you know, coupled together into a movie. Really, they work in a pretty good tight knot, and it's incredible. It's got the budget, it's got the visual looks, and it's Star Wars being allowed to breathe, which perhaps the Rise of Skywalker, you know, wasn't quite allowed to breathe over the you know, the running time for a film. And again, you know, having been a cinema manager, I do realise that the reasons for that are quite logistical, because it means you can have an extra screening a day. You can show the film 4 times a day rather than only 3 times. If it goes over 3 hours in length, you have to sort of cut a show off, and that means you're cutting lots and lots of money off the tickets you can sell. So, you know, there are sort of sound reasons why films have to be a little bit shorter. But I thought The Mandalorian really, you know, it did what we all wanted. It kind of gave you that sort of, you know, deep dive into Star Wars, unhurried, and it allowed you to really kind of you know, get into the environments, and it showed us some cool things we hadn't seen before in Star Wars too, as well as some things that were familiar. You know, the troop carrier being another one, the Jawa Sag Call, and all of this stuff. Fantastic.
Hey man, it's me, Kevin Smith, Star Wars fan, Fantha Tracks fan.
Do you think the film would have benefited by being split into 2? And by that I mean there's a lot of plot in Rise of Skywalker. It's a 2-hour 20 film, probably 10 minutes of credits. So there's a lot to fit in. And as much as I admire the paciness of it, because it is a quick moving film, there's a lot going on. And any film could, couldn't it? Of course. But, you know, it could have benefited perhaps from a little bit more breathing room. Do you think there's 2 films in there, or do you think they did the right decision?
I think there's a part of me, I think we've got to take a step back and go, well, if the last trilogy is actually a quadrilogy, that would probably really kind of get to a lot of people's OCD. I think it's right in that some people have said that it almost feels like Rise of Skywalker is partly maybe where J.J. would have gone if he had done the middle chapter. And for instance, I kind of feel like if episode 8 in let's say a J.J. universe had ended with obviously the revelation and then Rey back on Acto doing what she did, that you could almost see that would be the natural end for like episode 8. I suppose it's difficult if they had really kind of like knew that they were going to end up with Palpatine being such a prominent character for 9, even if it was just a couple of lines or something. Like, for instance, a bit like how it happened in Solo. Kira's now in charge, and then obviously Darth Maul appears and kind of says, come to me, definitely. I kind of feel like if there was some kind of line, like, for instance, somebody had just ran in after Snoke had died and, you know, Kylo's there and kind of received a message from Exegol or something. There's some kind of hint, you know, it just, you know, but then again, that's hindsight. And obviously in hindsight, we could rewrite everything. I mean, we rewrite Star Wars all the time.
That's a good point. It just feel like at some point, you know, if this was under George's watch, and of course if it had been, then there would have been more connected material because he would have written and directed all 3 presumably. It does feel like at some juncture in 10 years time we'd be going, oh, it's the sequel trilogy special edition, and that's the little nuggets they drop in to tie it all together.
Tie it together, exactly. Yeah. What do you think?
It is a tough one, and I get and it sounds silly, and I laughed, but it's completely true. Star Wars fans are OCD about this. So to make it a quadrilogy, I mean, I'm a Potter fan, so I wonder how Potter fans felt about there's 7 books and you expect 7 films, but you get 8 films. And my gut feeling from Potter fandom is that they were actually really chuffed to bits they got 2 films.
Yeah.
You know, and that they kind of wish that the previous 3 monster-sized books had also been 2 films because there was so much trimmed from them.
I think that is very true, because I mean I've read Potter and I felt exactly the same thing. If you were to cram, you know, the last book into one film, unless you're going to really be ballsy and make it 3 hours plus, you're cutting out too much. But then again, you've got a point of reference to compare.
That's my point. Yeah.
A bit like with the Lord of the Rings trilogy, even though Peter Jackson was pretty clever and nicked, you know, some of Tom Bombadil's kind of words and gave them to Treebeard for special editions, stuff like that. There's too much in those books to fit into 3 films.
Yeah. But you make a really good point, is that these aren't based on anything other than notes and noodles that the producers are making behind the scenes. So, but there's a lot of plot, and because Last Jedi and Force Awakens, I mean, they were making Last Jedi before Force Awakens even came out. So there's huge overlaps in production, but it didn't feel, to me anyway, like there's a huge amount of overlap in collaboration. I think there's elements of it, and obviously off the back of 8 into 9, there's bits as well. But then I would imagine Colin Trevorrow had a far deeper relationship with Rian Johnson than J.J. did in that sense. That's why this Duel of the Fates script is so fascinating, I think.
I think so. I'm not too sure about this whole thing about, maybe this is me being a fan of like Expanded Universe and the whole Plagueis thing, but having kind of like Kylo go off and meet, what's that guy's name? That big kind of spidery thing on that planet.
I can't think of the name, but I know what you mean. Yeah.
To get trained, because he was the one who kind of trained Palpatine.
Yeah.
Again, this kind of maybe, and maybe this is it. Maybe some of these directors, you know, are coming in and they're thinking maybe it's my time to make my version of The Empire Strikes Back. Because obviously that's a very Empire-esque thing to have somebody train. And I think in the final movie to have somebody train like that does open up an interesting pacing conundrum.
I still think, though, that Star Wars, like Marvel, needs somebody like a Kevin Feige as a figurehead at the top. Kathleen Kennedy is a producer, but she's not a creative in that sense. You know, but somebody, obviously you're going to say Filoni or Favreau. Filoni more than Favreau because he's been around it so much longer. But, you know, somebody who's got that proper, everything goes past this guy's desk.
I think so. And I think there's possibly misconceptions as to what some people believe the role of the story group is, and then also some what it should be. I mean, it's interesting. If it, and I think it's different because we're talking about $120 million budgets, you know, these films, plus $200 million budgets for films. So it's a risk to kind of go, right, we're gonna do a Star Wars trilogy without any real direction. And we know historically that actually how much Lucas had planned out is kind of up for debate, but there's still kind of like, I think the main overarching getting from A to B was always roughly there, and it's obviously where the characters go in the meantime. And I think obviously the biggest change is possibly where Jedi, and obviously when he kind of felt like we've got to just wrap this up, I'm done. You kind of would have thought that even, it's a little bit short-sighted to possibly kind of go, right, okay, we're going to just do this film, we're going to do Force Awakens, then not be conversations with J.J. and Lawrence Kasdan to actually say, right, so where do you see this going? Because surely that's the conversation that I would have. If I pick up a job at work from somebody, it's like, right, so where's the end point for this? What is happening with this character? Where do we go?
Yeah.
And then obviously it would then be Rian Johnson's or Colin Trevorrow's kind of job to kind of make those kind of landmarks kind of land when they need to, and for the story beats to kind of be more kind of conducive to the overall story. But then actually what happens in between and how they get there is up to them. But it does seem a little bit odd, and a slightly wasted opportunity, I think. So on one hand, it's good to, that they've kind of done something a little bit brave and a little bit outside the box compared to maybe like Marvel and have it all planned out. But on the other side, we can really see where the shortcomings are of that, I think.
Absolutely. Well, the next 3 years are going to be fascinating. Obviously, we move into the television era, but 3 years now till the next film. Apparently, this month we hear who the new director will be, and a little bit, loads of rumours, this whole High Republic thing 400 years before Star Wars, which sounds fascinating. Obviously, there's certain characters that may still be around, like Yoda, obviously. But I just wonder how they're going to play it. It seems like now's the time to change things up, and more so behind the scenes, because everything you've just said I agree with. It needed more focus. It didn't need the original trilogy was, Lucas made Star Wars, didn't know if he'd ever get to make Empire. Star Wars is the biggest movie ever, and then he makes Empire, and then he gets to the end of Empire and Kurtz leaves and he makes Jedi, and there was a lot of moving parts and a lot of really good fortune in that the people he brought on board was just like McQuarrie and people like that were just geniuses. And so I would argue Jedi was the one film where he really kind of got away with it. Does that make sense? Because there was so much on the fly. When they were doing Empire, it wasn't until like second or third draft of Empire that he decided that Vader was Luke's father.
Exactly.
It wasn't until they were chewing over ideas for Jedi that he decided Luke and Leia were brother and sister. And he couldn't go back in time and take out that kiss from Empire, so he would just have to roll with it. So there's a lot of good fortune, serendipity in that.
Exactly, and I think also, fandom is a lot different to how it is then, and it'd be interesting to go back to a time and see how this trilogy would have played out with the fans without, say, the internet. But that is just obviously, that's just the nature of the beast now, and that's how it is. I do wonder if the Old Republic is the obvious thing. Is that the best place to go, or do they go super far in the future? But I think if you go before, then it would be interesting to almost like not have any reference, even before Yoda. So, because I think there is a certain amount of nostalgia, and we're all hamstrung by our preconceived ideas about what should be in a Star Wars film, especially a sequel Star Wars film. But if we go so far back, you only have to go back more than 1,000 years. That then opens up a whole kind of like realm of possibility. Again, the problem is Star Wars being the age it is, there's so much expanded universe reference material.
Yeah. That's a really good point, because they've pitched it 400 years, so you're in that 1,000-year gap between the last encounter between a Jedi and a Sith, and then Qui-Gon and Maul on Tatooine having their kick-off in Phantom Menace. So you're in that gap. So you can't have Jedi versus Sith if you set it in there, unless they're going to really go against what's been laid down in the past, which I think would be a mistake. You kind of look at Star Wars and think, at the time of A New Hope, there's Vader, there's the Emperor, obviously, there's Ben, there's Yoda on Dagobah, there's Luke awakening, and Leia now, I guess you could look at in a similar way, even though she didn't blossom in that sense until later. But there's not that many Jedi in the galaxy. But then we've learnt through Rebels, through Clone Wars, through all of the other avenues, there was actually loads. And your headcanon thinks, well, that's not right, that's not what I knew. But then you think, well, how many trillion people are there in the galaxy? Of course there was more, you just didn't hear about them.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. I mean, I always struggle, because I've always had in my head canon that by the time A New Hope comes out, there is literally only Ben, Yoda, and Luke.
Yeah.
But that is my age and narrow, it's like a slightly narrow-minded kind of perspective. I mean, I've finished Jedi Fallen Order, and it's a great game.
Yeah.
And I'd like to see more with that character. But obviously it's kind of like, how would he, or how does he fit in? Because obviously, of course, as soon as you have, when you create a Kanan and you create an Ezra, you kind of have to map out slightly where they're going to end up. especially if they're so prevalent and so well known to the Empire, you've got to kind of tie their fates together somehow.
Yeah, they were very cute with that, weren't they? Because Kanan obviously dies, and Ezra gets presumably thrown it through time. So he's walked through the world between worlds, and he's sort of disappeared. Where will he turn up? He might turn up 1,000 years ago, or he might turn up 50 years in the future. You just don't know. So I think they were very thematically cute with that.
Yes.
and very conscious of exactly what we were just talking about. This, like, we can't have Jedi roaming around like crazy, because at the time of Attack of the Clones they said there's only 10,000 Jedi Knights in the galaxy, so they were sparse anyway. And that's why I'm curious, if you go back to this, what they're referring to as the High Republic era, 400 years before that, how prolific were the Jedi then? Were they still the paragons of virtue that you kind of think they were, or were they starting to become blind and arrogant like they clearly had become by the time of the prequels, because they were just so blind to everything that was happening they just couldn't see it?
It'd be nice to just kind of see a slightly kind of more diverse character portrayal of Jedi. You kind of see that in like Jedi Apprentice, with some of the Jedi there and stuff like that who are more like Qui-Gon, because obviously I think the one thing that you don't really catch on as well as you do in the expanded universe in the film is with Qui-Gon and how much of a loose cannon he is.
Oh, totally, yeah.
In the expanded universe, he kind of is a lot more kind of portrayed that way as being actually like, a lot more of a rogue Jedi, shall we say. I suppose it all depends upon what they think what's going to resonate. Who's really making the final decisions on those kind of like massive plot points? Is it Kathleen Kennedy? Is it Disney who's saying, right, we basically now just want to create our Star Wars?
Yeah.
We've done what we've had to do to, fulfill the kind of agreements of, I guess, a deal or whatever with the Lucasfilm sale. Yeah. But now it's really up to them, I guess, to an extent. It's like, where do they want it to go as well?
That's a good point in the sense that I think the one victim of all of this as time goes on could be any sense of canon and I mean that by obviously there's the chronology, but Star Wars was always very unique in that it didn't always hit the reset button. Of course it did. You had the original Marvel run, and then you had the second run through the 90s, and now you've got another sort of hash at the timeline. So there is. But generally things kind of fit together, all the worlds fit and all that stuff. But did Disney buy an ongoing story that they are fleshing out, or did Disney buy a setting? And the whole idea of, we just want to tell great stories, and who cares if they kill Even Peel off in the last episode? I want him in this one. That's what concerns me, and that chronology does matter.
Yeah, exactly. And it's for instance, it's we just talk about this is perfect. We can have like Darth Bane and stuff like that, and we can see how he creates Rule of Two, which would be cool. But we have had that in the book, and I think one thing we're kind of seeing is that actually with Star Wars, that you're right, there is no bad ideas. Bad idea is kind of left. They rework stuff and they keep the good ideas. It's just how they bring it back in.
Yeah.
But basically, it would go back to a point where it's like, this will have to be very accessible to the general viewers. And if we start going down too much of a Revan and Bane, about all that kind of characters from 15, 20 years ago now, almost, that's going to restrict what they're doing, I think.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's interesting. I'm excited for it. I think it will be quite a fun kind of era, and never a bad thing about having so many Jedi, I don't think. And it might actually be quite nice to see more Sith as well, and how they do it. I think they tried that with Rebels a little bit, with Inquisitors, but they all felt a little bit gimmicky to an extent, really.
Yeah.
If you look at how the Jedi dress, it's fairly nondescript. It's earth tones and stuff like that. And actually, the ones that you remember, the ones are different alien races and stuff like that. So it'd be quite cool to see just dark side kind of Jedi and Sith and that. And
that's a good point about the Inquisitors. It did kind of get to a point where, this is the one that uses nunchucks. This is the one that uses a lightsaber that's shaped like a skipping rope. It was kind of gimmicky. It was cool, but like you say, it did feel a little bit,
And I think that's probably not a criticism. That's maybe just partly down to the medium of animation that they used for it. And I think also more of a case of, again, trying to appeal to like such a wide demographic. So it's not just for us 35 plus fans.
True.
It's actually for the younger audience. So therefore but I think actually it being too nuanced, all that stuff kind of gets slightly kind of overlooked by the younger audience. They quite like differences and stuff like that. It's easier to kind of contrast people that way.
Hello, this is Sam Whitwer, and you are listening to Fantha Tracks.
Do you think that you'd be happy with that if it was a 400-year gap, or would you want to go further back? Or?
No, I totally take your point. If you go too far back, because there's so much more legend stuff that's gone back there, that 2% of the fandom we talked about earlier, kind of, even if you've not watched it or played it or read it to any great degree, you're very aware of it. So you are starting to step on the toes of certain things there. But the 400-year gap, that gap between... I mean, what was it? Knights Errant, John Jackson did. That was about 1,000 years before Star Wars, wasn't it? Give or take. And then you really didn't have very much at all between there and Phantom Menace. So, it does feel like it's ripe for plundering, that era.
I think so. Yeah, I mean, because Darth Bane was 360 years or something like that?
Something like that, yeah.
I think, maybe. Somebody's going to shout at us. But actually, that'd be an interesting point actually about all that, and this is a massive tangent, is obviously, if you look at the visual dictionary for Rise of Skywalker, they've changed the chronology.
I don't like that.
I mean, that kind of does, I think, partly, it is probably a big indicator, like how the classic trilogy and the prequel trilogy is now going to be perceived maybe going forward.
It said to me, one, it just felt like change for change's sake, because Star Wars fans have used the Yavin as a starting point since Star Wars, pretty much, or certainly since Jedi, when you kind of got some distance on it. So I don't think general fans are ever going to adopt that as their New Year's hero. And also it did say to me that if you're counting Starkiller Base, because I mean Rise of Skywalker was only a year after Starkiller Base, pretty much, from first seeing Rey on Jakku to the end of Last Jedi with Broom. Well, I don't know when that Broom Boy scene is set. I always got the feeling that was a fair bit later into that year's gap between the two films. But that was just how I read it, because how would the word get out otherwise? They're on the run, and there's lots of little inconsistencies there. But point being, it just said to me, if we're going to make this year's hero, there's going to be stories set after Rise of Skywalker. There's just got to be. And I hope there is. If they said, right, episode 9 is as far forward in the timeline you go, and episode 1 is as far back, there's enough in that 60-odd year gap to tell lots of significant stories with the Skywalker saga events as the backdrop, and you could still tell stories. But that being said, to go back another 400 years to Coruscant at a much higher level than it was, because we all know the lower levels are pretty grim and grimy. There's all sorts of shady stuff going on. It's a city planet, so there's all sorts of crazy stuff happening. To see Coruscant in a better place, to see the Jedi in a better place, and see what's happening around the galaxy.
Yeah, and the galaxy, yeah. Oh, and just as a minor aside, Darth Bane was 1,003 to 1,000 years before Battle of Yavin. I'm just checking it.
No, that's good. That's good. That fits then, doesn't it? Yeah.
This is on Wikipedia. The Legend books timeline starts at 25,793 years before Battle of Yavin with
Dawn of the Jedi.
Dawn of Jedi, which was fun. I thought that was an awesome collection of books.
Yeah.
So the question is if they're setting it only 400 years before, then that's clearly an established Jedi Order and a galaxy that's pretty much kind of like used to the Jedi and stuff like that. Would you prefer it to almost be like a completely just a clean start, as it were, or like you said, would you like to see it with Yoda featured?
From a fan's point of view, I'm happy to explore completely new stuff. That's why I'm digging The Mandalorian. But there's enough waypoints in The Mandalorian to make you feel comfortable. You're in Star Wars land, and you know where you are. And you will in this, because presumably it's going to be Coruscant based and all the other stuff, that familiar stuff that you're going to see. But I want to see Yoda. I don't want to see Yoda completely redesigned like he was in The Phantom Menace. Let's say that. If we see Yoda, I don't see any reason why he would look that much different to the way we know him from Empire and that era because of his age. I don't want to see some weird rubbery looking Yoda that doesn't feel like Yoda.
If they're going to do it, I reckon they go all the way and they get The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, to basically suit up in like a mocap suit and just do like a middle-aged like hench Yoda and just
Broder.
Exactly. I mean, like, if you're going to do it, because I think the problem was with the episode 1 Yoda was he was just a little bit too close in terms of like the timeline was too close to compare to Empire. But if you're going that far back, I mean, it'd be interesting and it'd be great to see, hopefully more Yodas.
Well, that's his thing, you see. Then it opens up that whole story point of like, okay, we saw Yaddle, but you kind of, and we've now got Baby Yoda, but is Baby Yoda an actual naturally born member of that species, or was it created, or whatever? So yeah, loads of answers to go through there. But yeah, I'm just thinking of Jumanji 2. You saying about Dwayne Johnson playing Yoda? I'm just thinking Dwayne Johnson just played Danny DeVito, and there's not that much difference, is there? Really?
No, exactly. We just get Danny DeVito. Yes, you know,
he'd be brilliant.
He would be brilliant. Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting. I mean, I would quite like to see and it doesn't necessarily have to be like Typhon, but like like a planet like Typhon where there's actually a Jedi Order. I mean, the question is whether or not, and this was something that I thought the other day, was actually it might be interesting to see the previous Force diode. Here's my elevator pitch. So you've basically got, I don't know, a brother and sister, or like two people who literally.
I know where you're going with this.
A bit like Lost Stars, maybe, who are very close to begin with, but then they take two different paths. Maybe one goes to the Sith and one stays with the Jedi, or one turns.
Well, here's my pitch then. Standing on the shoulders of your wonderful pitch. How about Yoda was one half of that dyad?
See, that would do it, and yeah, that would be pretty cool.
Listen to this podcast, Lucas. We've got all the best ideas.
Yeah, that's a freebie. They
can have that one. Yeah, we just want ticket, front row tickets to the premiere. That's all we want.
Yeah, exactly.
And an umbrella.
Yes.
If you want to get in touch with Panther Tracks, this is how you do it. You can drop us an email, radio@panthertracks.com, or you can comment on our Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, Tumblr, any of our social media feeds @Panther Tracks. If you want to listen to the show, you can tune in on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, listen to us on Stitcher, subscribe on Android, listen to us on Spotify, on SoundCloud, subscribe on TuneIn, listen to iHeartRadio, or even on Spreaker. We're on smart speakers such as Amazon Alexa, Apple HomePod, Google Home and Sonos. We're also available in your car, if you've got a car or a land speeder, with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, or on your gaming consoles and your television. You can find us on Panther Tracks TV. You can get the Panther Tracks app, can't recommend that highly enough, available on all platforms. And for any details on how to listen in or subscribe, head to the Panther Tracks radio landing page on panthertracks.com.